Stop. Listen to that sound. That's the sound of your reputation shattering because you tried to argue with a fool. We've all been there. You're in a meeting, at a dinner table, or just having a conversation, and they appear. The arrogant person. The one who speaks in absolutes. The one who corrects your emotions. The one who uses confidence as a weapon because they have no substance as a shield. And usually, we react in one of two ways. We either shrink, we swallow our pride and nod, letting them walk over us, or we explode. We match their fire with gasoline, and we end up looking just as foolish as they do. But what if I told you there was a third way, a secret path carved out by the ancient Stoics 2,000 years ago, a way to win the battle without firing a single shot, a way to look into the eyes of an arrogant person and with just a few words, drain the power right out of them. Welcome. Today, we're not just talking about comebacks, we're talking about psychological disarmament. We're going to break down 7 powerful, Stoic-inspired phrases that don't just silence the arrogant, they reveal who you are. By the end of this video, you will have the tools to stand so firm that no one's ego can shake you. Let's begin. Number 1. The atomic bomb of emotional control. 4 words. You may be right. It sounds simple. It sounds like surrender, but in the mouth of a Stoic, it is a trap. The arrogant person thrives on friction. They're like a fire that needs oxygen. They poke and prod because they want you to prove them wrong. They want you to get defensive because your defense validates their position as the attacker. When you say, you may be right, you are removing the oxygen. Think about the psychology here. They have just made a sweeping, arrogant statement. They expect you to fight. But instead, you agree, not with passion, but with indifference. Epictetus, the great Stoic philosopher, once said, "It is not the things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about those things." An arrogant person calls you incompetent. Your immediate judgment might be, "I must defend my honor." But what if you changed that judgment to, "His opinion is a reflection of him, not me"? When you say, "You may be right," you are not admitting defeat. You're stepping out of the ring. You are refusing to play their game. Imagine the scene. A colleague belittles your idea in a meeting. "That will never work," they sneer. "It's naive." Your heart rate spikes. The blood rushes to your face. The old you would have fired back. But the Stoic warrior, the new you, looks them dead in the eye, pauses for 3 seconds, let the silence hang, and says softly, "You know what? You may be right. What just happened? You robbed them of their fuel. The engine of their ego just ran out of gas. They expected a reaction. You gave them a mirror. And in that mirror, they see themselves arguing with a statue. When you say, you may be right, you are effectively saying, your opinion is your problem, not mine. You are detaching your self-worth from their judgment. Here's the beautiful part, and this is what most people miss. You're not actually agreeing with them. You're acknowledging the possibility that they could be right, which is always true about anything. It's intellectually honest, it's philosophically sound, but more importantly, it's emotionally devastating to their arrogance. Try it. The next time someone tries to belittle you with an opinion disguised as a fact, just shrug and say, "You know what? You may be right." Watch the confusion in their eyes. They were ready for a war. You gave them a mirror. Phrase number 2. I appreciate your passion. The second phrase is a masterclass in reframing. I appreciate your passion. Arrogant people often mistake volume for validity. They think if they shout louder, speak faster, or use bigger words, they are winning. Seneca warned us about this. He said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor." An arrogant person is starving for respect. They are poor in spirit. They crave your attention. When you say, "I appreciate your passion," you are doing something incredibly subtle. You are not engaging with their argument. You are commenting on their emotional state. You are acting as an observer, not a participant. You become the therapist, and they become the patient, having an episode on the couch. You seem very passionate about this. It validates them just enough to calm them down, but it also gently points out that they are being overly emotional, the one thing an arrogant person despises being accused of. Think about it. They want to be seen as logical and superior. By labeling their outburst as passion, you have subtly demoted them from a thinker to a feeler. You are the rock. They are the wave. The wave crashes, roars, and foams, but the rock remains. I saw this play out beautifully at a board meeting once. An executive was red-faced, pounding the table, telling everyone how ridiculous a proposal was. Another board member, calm, centered, waited for him to finish, then said, "I really appreciate your passion about this. It's clear you care deeply." The room went quiet. The executive had nowhere to go. He'd been acknowledged but not engaged. His anger had been named as emotion, not logic. He sat down. Use this phrase when someone is trying to bulldoze you with emotion. It places you above them in the hierarchy of control. It says, "I see you, I hear your noise, but I will not be moved by it."
Phrase number 3, help me understand your logic. This is the Socratic method weaponized. Socrates, the grandfather of Western philosophy, didn't win arguments by overpowering people. He won by asking questions until the other person talked themselves into a corner. An arrogant person thrives on sweeping generalizations. "This is stupid. You're wrong. Everyone knows that." When you ask, "Help me understand your logic," you are inviting them to lay out their blueprints. You are putting them under the microscope. "Okay, you say this idea is terrible. Help me understand. Specifically, what about it doesn't work? What data are you using? What is the alternative?" Most of the time, they have no logic. They have an emotion masquerading as an opinion. They have never actually thought through why they believe what they believe. They just believe it because it makes them feel powerful. By asking them to explain, you force them to either produce real substance, which they usually can't, or reveal their intellectual emptiness. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Don't waste your time fighting an opinion. Instead, spend a few seconds asking them to defend it. Watch them crumble under the weight of their own lack of reasoning. You haven't attacked them. You've simply asked them to show their work, and they failed the test. Here's what happens in real time. Someone says, "Your approach is completely wrong." You respond, "Help me understand your logic. What specifically makes it wrong?" They'll usually say something vague. "It just is. Anyone can see that." You stay calm. "I want to understand. Walk me through it. What's step 1 of why it fails?" Now they're scrambling because they never thought it through. They were operating on feeling, not thinking. And the beautiful part? You never argued. You just asked questions. This phrase works because it separates the arrogant from the competent. Competent people can explain their reasoning. Arrogant people can't. Phrase number 4. What would success look like for you? Now we're getting tactical. This phrase is about shifting the entire conversation. What would success look like for you? Let me tell you about a moment in Marcus Aurelius' life. He was emperor, yes, but he was constantly surrounded by generals, senators, advisors, all with massive egos, all vying for power and influence. There's an account of a general who kept criticizing Marcus's military strategy, loudly, arrogantly, in front of others. Instead of pulling rank, Marcus asked him, "What would you do differently?" Simple question, devastating effect. Because now the general had to actually propose something. He couldn't just criticize, he had to contribute. And when you ask, "What would success look like for you?" to an arrogant person, you're doing the same thing. You're saying, "Okay, you don't like this. What do you suggest?" Most arrogant people are critics, not creators. They're great at tearing things down, but terrible at building things up. So when you ask this question, one of two things happens. Either they give you a legitimate alternative, which in case, great, now you're having a productive conversation. Or they fumble, backtrack, and reveal they were just being difficult.
in which case you've exposed their arrogance without ever calling them out. This phrase also does something powerful for you. It keeps you solution-focused instead of ego-focused. The Stoics were obsessed with this. They didn't care about being right. They cared about finding truth and making progress. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." When you ask, "What would success look like for you?" you're embodying wisdom. You're showing that your goal isn't to win an argument, it's to reach understanding. And that level of maturity, it's rare, it's magnetic, it's powerful. I've used this phrase in salary negotiations, in creative disagreements, in family conflicts, and every single time it transforms the dynamic, because suddenly the person has to think constructively instead of destructively. They have to move from "this is wrong" to "this is what right looks like." In most arrogant people, they've never practiced that muscle. Try this at work, try it at home. The next time someone's being difficult, ask them, "What would success look like for you?" You'll be amazed at how often it transforms the entire dynamic. Phrase number 5. That's an interesting perspective. There is something uniquely powerful in the word interesting. Think about it. Interesting is not positive. Interesting is not negative. It is a complete withdrawal of judgment. It says, "I have observed this thing. I have not yet decided what to make of it." When you tell someone their perspective is interesting, and you do it without irony, without a smirk, with genuine thoughtfulness, it completely subverts the frame they've tried to impose on you. That's an interesting perspective. The arrogant person came in with a statement. You were reflecting it back as an opinion. And that is a seismic shift. Here's the Stoic principle underneath this phrase. Epictetus taught his students something that he called the faculty of choice, the Greek word prohairesis. He said that every impression we receive, everything that happens to us, everything said to us, is just that, an impression. It is not reality. It is not truth. It is one person's experience filtered through their wounds, their history, their need to feel superior. That's an interesting perspective, is the externalization of that internal philosophy. It says, what you have said is not a fact about me or the world. It is a perspective about you. And by calling it a perspective, you removes its authority entirely. There's a fascinating dynamic that happens when you use this phrase consistently. It forces the arrogant person to justify themselves. Because interesting perspective implies implicitly that there are other perspectives, that theirs is not the only one, that it has been noted but not necessarily adopted. And most arrogant people are not equipped to handle this.
Because their entire worldview rests on the assumption that their perspective is not a perspective. It's the perspective, the truth, the standard, the measure by which all others are found lacking. When you name it as a perspective, one among many, worthy of consideration but not automatic authority, you introduce something into the conversation that arrogance cannot metabolize: intellectual equality. And that, for a person who has organized their entire identity around being above, is deeply destabilizing. There's an old story about a Zen master who was visited by a famous scholar. The scholar came in talking immediately, laying out all of his knowledge, his theories, his credentials. The master began pouring tea. He filled the scholar's cup and kept pouring. The tea overflowed, ran across the table, spilled onto the floor. The scholar jumped back. "What are you doing? It's full. It can't hold anymore." And the master said calmly, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions. How can I show you anything unless you first empty your cup?" That's an interesting perspective, is your way of acknowledging that someone's cup is very, very full, without telling them, without spilling the tea, just watching and choosing not to let their overflow become your flood. Phrase number 6. Thank you for sharing that. This phrase is my personal favorite, and I'll tell you why. Because it is the most polite, most graceful, most disarming thing you can possibly say to an arrogant person, and they hate it. Thank you for sharing that. On the surface, it sounds like the kind of thing you'd say in a corporate training seminar. Gentle, neutral, almost toothless. But here's what it actually does. It receives what was thrown at you. the dismissal, the condescension, the unsolicited opinion, and it names it for what it is. Not a commandment, not a fact, not a judgment that must be answered. Just a share, something one person offered, something you have politely acknowledged, and something that requires absolutely nothing more from you. Let's talk about the psychology of what arrogance expects. When someone talks down to you, they are extending, consciously or not, an implicit demand. Agree with me, push back against me, get uncomfortable, react. Any of those responses feeds the loop. Agreement confirms their authority. Pushback starts the fight they wanted. Discomfort proves their power. But thank you for sharing that does none of those things. It accepts the message without accepting the authority behind it. It gives them the basic courtesy of being heard, which is all any human being is actually owed, while keeping your inner world completely sealed from their influence. You are, in effect, catching a knife by the blade and placing it gently on the table. Interesting knife. Thanks for the demonstration. Let's move on. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher and statesman, wrote this in his letters: "Regard a man's attempts to disquiet you as you would regard the barking of a dog. Let it bark and go about your business." Now, Seneca was not saying to be dismissive of every person. He was making a specific, carefully targeted point about noise that is designed to destabilize you. "Thank you for sharing that" is the living embodiment of this principle. It says, "I heard the bark, I am not running, I am continuing," and it does something else. It closes the loop. When you argue with an arrogant person, the conversation has no natural endpoint. Every response opens a new front. Every defense invites a new attack. It can go on indefinitely, with you getting smaller and them getting bigger. But "thank you for sharing that," delivered with calm finality, is a period at the end of the sentence. It's done. The conversation, at least on your end, is over. Ask yourself something. When was the last time you spent mental energy, hours maybe, days, replaying a conversation with someone who was rude to you, thinking about what you should have said, rehearsing the perfect comeback in the shower at midnight? What would your life look like if those hours were yours again? "Thank you for sharing that" is how you reclaim them, not because you've won, but because you've refused to play. I remember using this with a family member who loved to criticize my career choices. Every holiday, same script. "When are you gonna get a real job? You're wasting your potential." For years, I'd defend myself, explain, justify. Last Thanksgiving, they started in again, and I just smiled and said, "Thank you for sharing that." And I turned to someone else and started a new conversation. The criticism stopped, not because they changed, but because I stopped providing the reaction they needed. Phrase number 7, silence. The 7th phrase. And you already know on some level what it is, because I'm going to ask you to sit with something uncomfortable for a moment. The most powerful thing you can say to an arrogant person is nothing. I know, that's not what you expected. You came for words, and the most powerful thing I can offer you is the absence of words. But hear me out, because silence, real silence, not the silence of someone who doesn't know what to say, not the silence of fear or confusion or paralysis, but chosen silence, stoic silence, the silence of someone who has decided that this does not deserve a response. That is a weapon of extraordinary precision. In ancient Rome, there was a concept the Stoics returned to again and again. They called it recte facti fere morum, the grace of having acted rightly without requiring acknowledgement. But more practically, Marcus Aurelius put it like this: "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." The arrogance script, the performance of superiority, the theater of condescension, is, when you pull back and see it clearly, insane. It is a person performing a drama that exists entirely in their head, casting you as the villain so that they can play the hero. And every word you contribute to that drama, even the right words, even the perfect words, is one more line in a script that doesn't serve you. Silence opts out of the script entirely. There's a true story about a debate that took place in ancient Athens. A powerful general, a man celebrated for his military victories, drunk on his own reputation, stood before the philosopher Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism. He talked for a long time about his campaigns, his victories, his genius, his assessments of philosophy, of wisdom, of life.
things he knew nothing about but spoke on with absolute authority. When he finished, he looked at Zeno, waiting, expecting either admiration or combat. Zeno looked back at him.
For a long, unhurried moment, and then Zeno turned and continued speaking to his students, as though the general had said nothing of particular importance. The general stood there for a moment, unsure what had just happened, and then, quietly, he left. No argument, no victory, no defeat. Just the absolute thunderous clarity of a man who knew exactly what mattered, and it was not this. Here is what silence communicates that no words can match. When you respond to arrogance, even brilliantly, even perfectly, you are, at some level, acknowledging that it required a response. You are granting it a kind of status. But when you meet arrogance with absolute, unshaken silence, the kind of silence where your face is calm, your eyes are present, and your entire body communicates, "I have heard you, and I choose not to honor this with words," you have communicated the most devastating possible truth, that this was not worth the breath. And the arrogant person, who built their entire identity around being taken seriously, challenged, engaged, feared, suddenly finds themselves standing in a room where none of those things are available. The Stoics spoke constantly about what they called the dichotomy of control. Some things are up to us: our thoughts, our responses, our values, our choices. Some things are not up to us: other people's behavior, their arrogance, their need for dominance, their wounds. Every one of the 7 phrases in this video is, at its core, a practical application of this principle. You may be right. I control my attachment to being correct. I appreciate your passion. I control how I receive, not what is sent. Help me understand your logic. I control what I engage with. What would success look like for you? I control the direction of the conversation. That's an interesting perspective. I control how much authority I grant. Thank you for sharing that. I control what I absorb and what I release. And silence. Silence is the purest expression of the dichotomy of control in human interaction. It is the decision, clear, clean, total, that their arrogance belongs to them, and your peace belongs to you. Marcus Aurelius, in the very last lines of Book 2 of the Meditations, wrote something so simple it almost disappears. He wrote, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it." Think about every argument you've had with an arrogant person, every hour you spent rehearsing responses, every moment where their voice lived rent-free in your head at 3 in the morning. The arrogance, what did it actually cost you? The reaction to it, how much did that cost? Silence doesn't just disarm arrogance in the moment, it protects you after the moment. It keeps their noise out of your mind, their chaos out of your evening, their smallness out of your story. Let me tell you about a time I used this. I was in a professional setting. Someone publicly questioned my qualifications in front of a room of people. It was designed to humiliate, to put me in my place. The old me would have defended myself, listed credentials, proven my worth. But I remembered Marcus. I remembered Zeno. So I looked at them, made eye contact, held it for 3 seconds, and said nothing. Then I continued with what I was doing before they interrupted. The room felt it, the shift, the power. They tried once more. "Well, aren't you going to respond?" I smiled slightly and continued working. Within 5 minutes, someone else in the room said to them, "I think you've made your point. Let's move forward." I never had to defend myself. Silence did it for me. So, there you have it. 7 phrases. 1. You may be right. 2. I appreciate your passion. 3. Help me understand your logic. 4. What would success look like for you? 5. That's an interesting perspective. 6. Thank you for sharing that. 7. Silence. But here's what I need you to understand before you go. These phrases are not magic spells. They won't work if you're using them manipulatively or sarcastically. They work because of what they represent: self-control, wisdom, and inner strength. The Stoics didn't develop these principles to win arguments. They developed them to live better lives, to remain calm in chaos, to treat others with dignity even when they don't deserve it. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, wrote in his private journal, Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. That's what this is really about. Not disarming arrogant people because they're annoying, but mastering yourself because you deserve peace. Arrogance is a storm. It is loud, chaotic, and it promises destruction. But you are not a leaf to be blown about. You are an oak tree. Your roots are your values. Your trunk is your self-discipline. These 7 phrases are not just tricks to win arguments. They are reminders of who you are. They are the practice of living as a Stoic, focusing only on what is within your control, your mind, your reactions, and your virtue. The next time arrogance crosses your path, you have a choice. You can join the storm and be shattered, or you can stand firm, speak softly, and let the storm exhaust itself against the cliffs of your tranquility. Choose to be the cliff. When you stop reacting to every provocation, when you respond with wisdom instead of ego, something incredible happens. You become free. Free from needing validation. Free from needing to be right. Free from letting someone else's arrogance ruin your day. If this resonated with you, if you want to build a soul that cannot be shaken, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Join us on this path of wisdom, because in a world full of noise, the quietest minds are the most powerful. Until next time, remain unshakable.